Welcome. In the eyes of many, Los Angeles is a promised land, a paradise of opportunity where even the wildest dreams can come true. People still tell each other stories of the young men and women from distant, small towns who set foot in the city and wrote the fairy tales of their own lives. But Los Angeles, like any glittering metropolis, has two faces. Alongside the dazzling lights of its skyscrapers are the dark, hidden corners of its narrow alleys, where dreams can be suffocated and lives can be swept away by the indifferent current of existence. Today, I will tell you such a story. A tragedy that began with the devotion of a girl from the Deep South, passed through the snares of money, and ended with a horrific crime concealed in a place no one could ever imagine. A case where the truth was only exposed when the very water meant to cleanse life became tainted with the smell of death. Our story begins in a cotton field in Mississippi, under the blazing sun of the American South. Chloe Davis, an 18-year-old girl with long black hair and eyes that always seemed to speak, was hunched over, helping her mother pick cotton. Sweat soaked her simple work shirt, but Chloe's gaze wasn't on the white bolls of cotton, but far away, towards the interstate where buses rumbled day and night, heading for Los Angeles. A dream always burned within her. The dream of escaping a life of muddy hands and aching backs. The dream of a city of lights, and above all, the dream of earning enough money to cure her ailing father and rebuild their rickety wooden house. Her father, a gentle farmer who had only ever known his small plot of land, had been sick for months. His cough grew heavier each day, tearing through the quiet of the night and the hearts of his family. After graduating from high school, Chloe decided to put her college aspirations on hold. She knelt by her father's bedside, took his thin, frail hand, and told him through her tears to just hold on and get strong. She promised that she was going to Los Angeles to work and make money to get in the best doctors, and to make sure her little brother could stay in school, pleading with him to just wait for her to come back. The day Chloe got on the bus, her mother pressed a few crumpled dollar bills and a small loaf of cornbread into her hand. She gave her daughter all sorts of advice, but Chloe would only ever remember her mother's warning that whatever she did out there, she had to take care of herself. Chloe nodded, but she didn't know that in a place like Los Angeles, sometimes, taking care of yourself was the greatest luxury of all. In the beginning, Chloe found a job at a bubble tea shop in a small alley in Koreatown. The work was exhausting, standing for 8 hours a day, but she managed to earn $1,800 a month. She rented a room less than 100 square feet, cramped and hot as an oven, with 2 other girls. Every month, the first thing she did after getting paid was run to the post office and wire $1,200 back to her mother, keeping only $600 to cover all her expenses. Her meals often consisted of a packet of instant ramen with some hot water, or a plain sandwich. On nights when her stomach ached with hunger, she would just drink water to feel full and go to sleep. But whenever she got a call from her mother, hearing her joyful voice saying she'd received the money, all of Chloe's fatigue seemed to vanish. She believed her sacrifice was worth it. But then, one evening, she received a call from home. Her mother's voice was broken with sobs as she told Chloe that it was her daddy. The doctors, she explained, had said he had lung cancer and that he had to go to a specialist cancer center for radiation right away. The news struck her like a bolt of lightning. Chloe's entire world collapsed. She rushed to catch a bus home, and seeing her father, a man who had toiled his whole life, now rail-thin and coughing up blood in his sickbed, her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The cost of chemotherapy, radiation, medication, and living expenses were colossal figures, far beyond her family's means and her meager salary. A daughter's love and sense of responsibility would not let Chloe break. She knew she had to do something, no matter the cost. Returning to Los Angeles, Chloe threw herself into work like a moth to a flame. During the day, she continued at the bubble tea shop. At night, she took a second job as a waitress at Nightfall, a loud, chaotic nightclub in the downtown area. The environment here was a world away from her innocent life. The dim, flashing blue and red lights, the deafening beat of the dance music, the drunken men with their leering eyes and wandering hands. The first time she carried a tray of drinks to a customer, Chloe's hands trembled so much she spilled them, earning a sharp reprimand from the manager. She felt lost and terrified, but whenever she thought of her father, writhing in pain in his hospital bed, she gritted her teeth and endured. And it was in this complicated environment that she met Roxanne, a stylishly dressed woman in her late 30s who was a regular at the club. Roxanne quickly recognized the pure, rustic, yet potent beauty in Chloe. She didn't approach Chloe aggressively. She started by giving Chloe generous tips, making small talk, and asking about her family situation. She presented herself as an experienced, understanding older sister. One night, after the club had thinned out, Roxanne called Chloe over and handed her a glass of orange juice. She told Chloe to drink up, noting how pale she looked. She commented that it was a waste for a girl as beautiful as Chloe to be a waitress on a pittance of a salary, and questioned how long it would take to provide for her father. She then asked if Chloe had any idea how much she could make on just one date with one of her clients. Chloe looked down at the floor, silent. She understood what a date meant. Roxanne continued, her voice like a siren song. She acknowledged that she knew Chloe was a good girl, but that this world was a harsh reality where filial piety without money was worthless. She urged Chloe to just think about it, suggesting that if she just nodded her head, her father could have the best medicine and her brother could have his school fees paid the very next day. She framed it as trading a little piece of herself to save her whole family, asking if Chloe didn't think that was worth it. Roxanne's words were like needles, piercing straight into Chloe's pain. At first, she flatly refused. Her self-respect and her mother's words wouldn't allow her to do it. But then the phone calls from home, the medical bills piling higher and higher, began to erode her resolve. One day, when her mother called, sobbing because they had no more money for her father's medication, Chloe made a decision out of pure desperation. She dialed Roxanne's number. Her first night with a client was the most horrific night of Chloe's life. Roxanne took her to a luxurious hotel. The client was a man old enough to be her father, with a potbelly and a bald head. When he touched her with his rough hands, Chloe shuddered with revulsion. She cried. She felt filthy. She didn't sleep that night, just sat in the shower, letting the water pour over her as if trying to wash away the stain. But the next morning, when she held an amount of cash in her hand she had never even dreamed of, she immediately sent a portion of it home to her mother. Hearing her mother's happy voice on the phone, relieved to have money to pay the hospital, a part of her pain seemed to be soothed. She told herself it was just this one time. And just like that, she began to slide deeper into the mire. Among Chloe's clients was Richard Sterling, a man in his late 30s, the CEO of a major logistics company. Richard was handsome, polished, with a beautiful wife and wonderful children, a model of success. Unlike the other men, Richard treated Chloe gently. He wasn't aggressive or crude. He listened to her story, showing sympathy for her plight. After a few meetings, Richard told Chloe to quit that line of work. He said she didn't belong in that world and that he would take care of her. Richard rented an apartment for Chloe in a modest complex in Westwood. It was a small studio, only about 250 square feet, but it was clean, safe, and private. He gave her a monthly allowance of $5,000, enough for her to live comfortably and send a generous amount home to her family. He visited her 3 times a week. Chloe quit her old jobs, cut off all contact with Roxanne, and became Richard's secret mistress. To Chloe, at that moment, Richard was like a savior. He had pulled her out of the filthy swamp, giving her a comfortable life without her having to sell her dignity every night. She began to develop real feelings for him. She took care of him whenever he visited, cooking him delicious meals. She naively believed that his concern and financial support also stemmed from love. She didn't know that to Richard. She was just a plaything, a place for him to release his stress, a secret to satisfy the selfish ego of a successful man. He liked the feeling of being a hero, of protecting a weak girl, and most importantly, he could possess her without any strings attached. Life went on like this for nearly a year. Her father's condition improved somewhat, and she continued to send money home regularly. But then, another crisis occurred. Chloe discovered she was pregnant. Holding the pregnancy test with its 2 stark red lines, Chloe was both terrified and filled by a strange feeling stirring in her heart. This was her blood, the blood of the man she loved. Her maternal instincts awakened. Deep down, she yearned for a family, for acknowledgement. She didn't dare dream that Richard would marry her. She only hoped he would accept the child and give her a place, even if it was just as the mother of his child. She chose an evening when Richard was visiting to summon all her courage and tell him. Contrary to what she had imagined, Richard was not happy. His face darkened, turning frighteningly cold. He repeated what she said, his voice laced with suspicion, asking if she was pregnant. He then questioned if she was sure it was even his. Richard's words were like a knife straight through Chloe's heart. She burst into tears, asking how he could say that when she hadn't been with anyone else but him. Richard stood up and paced the room, a calculating look on his face. Finally, he stopped and looked at her with the eyes of a stranger. He told her to get rid of it and that he would give her a lot of money, $50,000, to take care of it quietly so they could go back to how things were. Chloe cried out that she wouldn't. She insisted it was her baby and his baby and that she would not get rid of it. She told him she didn't need him to marry her or give her a title, she just needed him to provide for their child so he could be born healthy. Richard snapped, asking if she was crazy and if she wanted to ruin his life, questioning if she had thought about his wife, children, or career. He told her for the last time to get rid of it. With that, he left callously. In the days that followed, he didn't visit her again. He blocked her phone number and blocked her on all social media. He vanished from her life as if he had never existed, leaving her alone with the growing baby in her womb and a crushing despair. The allowance stopped, her savings dwindled, and at 6 months pregnant, her belly was becoming obvious. Chloe could no longer hide it. Pushed into a corner, she did something desperate. She found Richard's company, asked around, and managed to find his home address, a luxurious mansion in Beverly Hills. One afternoon, she stood outside his gate, waiting. When she saw his luxury car approaching, she ran out to block it. Seeing Chloe, with her swollen belly and pale face, he quickly pulled her into a secluded corner, hissing as he asked what she wanted now. Chloe said through her tears that she wanted him to take responsibility for his child. She threatened that if he didn't provide for her and the baby, she would go into that house and tell his wife everything. She would sue him and go to the press, and then they would see how long he could hold onto his CEO title and his happy family. Chloe's threat struck at Richard's greatest fear. He was terrified of losing everything he had built: his family, his reputation, his career. He quickly changed his tone, his voice becoming syrupy sweet. He told her he was wrong but pleaded with her not to make a scene there. He told her to go back to the apartment and that he would come over at 9 p.m. that night so they could talk about it properly, assuring her that everything could be resolved. Chloe, in her desperation, once again believed his promise. She returned to her apartment to wait. At exactly 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. Chloe rushed to open it, a flicker of hope still alive in her heart. But the man who walked in was no longer her savior. Richard entered, empty-handed, his face a cold, emotionless mask. He sat down and looked directly at Chloe. He began by saying he had thought it over and that there was only one solution. She had to get rid of the baby. Chloe sobbed that she had already told him no, pleading that it was a person, already 6 months old, and begging him to have mercy on their child. Richard retorted by asking who was going to have mercy on him, accusing her of only thinking of herself. The argument erupted, growing more and more heated. Richard used the most vicious words to insult Chloe, accusing her of using the baby to blackmail him and destroy his family. Chloe, in her anguish and pain, lost her composure as well. She screamed that she would never let him live in peace. It was at that moment that a wicked thought flashed through Richard's mind. He couldn't let this threat escape. It had to be eliminated. Permanently. While Chloe wasn't paying attention, he circled behind her. He clamped both his hands around the throat of the girl carrying his own child. Chloe struggled desperately. Her eyes bulged, staring at him in disbelief and agony. She clawed at his hands, but what was the strength of a pregnant woman against a healthy man in a fit of rage? Just a few minutes later, her body went limp, then still. Richard Sterling had killed his lover and their unborn child. After the act, he collapsed onto the floor, panting, fear engulfing him. He had to dispose of the body. He looked around the room, then up at the ceiling. He suddenly remembered the large, stainless steel water tanks on the roof of the building. A gruesome plan formed in his mind. He waited until nearly midnight, when the entire apartment complex was submerged in silence. Moving a body was not easy. He found a large blanket, wrapped Chloe's body tightly, and then, with all his strength, dragged it into the hallway. His heart pounded like a drum. Every small sound made him jump. He pressed the elevator button, praying no one would appear. Luck was on his side. The elevator was empty. Up on the roof, the air was cold and deserted. He found a crowbar left behind by a repair crew and used all his strength to pry open the lid of one of the large water tanks, the tank that supplied domestic water to the entire building. He heaved Chloe's lifeless body inside, then replaced the lid as it was before. Afterward, he returned to Chloe's apartment, erased all traces, cleaned carefully, and then quietly left, believing his crime was now forever concealed by the cold, dark water. 3 days later, life in the apartment complex continued as usual. But a few residents began to complain about the quality of the water. A woman on the 4th floor asked her neighbor if the water tasted funny to them lately, describing a strange, foul, and gamey smell that was really unpleasant. The other replied that her house had the same problem and that she had cooked rice with it but didn't dare to eat it. The complaints grew more numerous and finally reached the ears of Mr. Peterson, the building manager. At first, he thought it might be the old pipes, but when too many tenants reported the same issue, he began to suspect something was wrong. He decided to inspect the water source, starting with the storage tanks on the roof. When Mr. Peterson and a maintenance worker climbed onto the roof, a thick, putrid stench hit them immediately. The smell seemed to be coming from one of the stainless steel water tanks. Sensing something was terribly wrong, they used their tools to pry open the lid. And then, a horrific scene was revealed before their eyes. Inside the water tank, a body, bloated and in a state of decomposition, was floating on the surface. It was the body of a woman. After a moment of shock, Mr. Peterson recognized the victim. It was the young woman who rented apartment 502. It was Chloe. News of a dead body in the water tank spread like wildfire. The entire complex was in an uproar. The police were quickly notified and sealed off the scene. Captain Marcus Thorne, a veteran of the homicide division, arrived personally. Looking at the victim's body, disfigured from being submerged for days, and visibly pregnant, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow and rage. He stated firmly that this wasn't a suicide, as no one commits suicide by climbing into a water tank and then pulling the heavy lid closed on top of themselves. He declared it a murder and a body dump, noting that the killer was extremely cruel and cunning. The investigation began. The first step was to pull the building's security footage. But the complex was old, the camera system was low quality, and was only installed at the entrance and inside the elevator. The footage was blurry. The police could only determine that on the night of the crime, a man wearing a jacket and a baseball cap that obscured his face had entered the elevator with a large, blanket-wrapped object and had gone to the top floor. Due to the poor image quality, identifying the killer was impossible. Identifying the victim was not difficult. The manager, Mr. Peterson, confirmed it was Chloe from apartment 502, but he knew little about her background. He only knew that she lived alone and was sometimes visited by a well-dressed man who drove a luxury car. The investigation seemed to have hit a dead end. The killer remained a faceless ghost. But Captain Thorne, with his years of experience, knew that in the digital age, no ghost is truly invisible. He decided to employ a crucial investigative technique. He ordered his subordinates to get in touch with the cell phone provider, wanting a full history of all calls and text messages, incoming and outgoing, from the victim's phone number for the past month. He believed they needed to find out who she was in contact with most frequently. A few days later, the call logs arrived from the provider. After filtering the data, investigators narrowed their focus to 2 phone numbers that had contacted the victim, Chloe Davis, most often. The first number belonged to a young man named Kevin Miller, 22, who worked as a food delivery driver. Kevin was brought in for questioning. In front of the investigators, Kevin was distraught to learn of Chloe's death. He explained that he had met Chloe when she worked at the bubble tea shop and had a secret crush on her but never had the courage to say anything. After she quit, he would still occasionally text her to see how she was doing. Sobbing, he described her as kind and sweet, saying he just saw that she seemed sad sometimes, so he would check in on her. He stated that on the night of the murder, he was making deliveries across town in the valley and that his app's GPS history could prove it. After verification, the police confirmed Kevin's alibi and cleared him of any involvement. The second phone number was registered to Sterling Logistics, LLC, and the primary user was its CEO, Richard Sterling. A team of detectives was sent to Richard's company to question him. Facing the police, Richard appeared very calm, even a little arrogant. He nonchalantly admitted to knowing Chloe, saying he had helped her out a bit from time to time because he felt sorry for her situation, but that it had been a while since they had been in touch. An investigator asked when he had last seen Ms. Davis. Richard claimed it must have been a few months ago, as his work kept him very busy. When asked where he was last Sunday night between 9 p.m. and midnight, he answered smoothly that he was at home with his wife and kids watching a movie and that his wife could vouch for him. He was confident that his wife, wanting to preserve their family, would never expose the truth. Richard's wife was also brought in for questioning. Initially, she repeated the same story her husband had told her to say, but faced with the serious demeanour and sharp questions from Captain Thorne, the woman began to look flustered. Captain Thorne told her that she was covering up a felony. He explained that they knew her husband was involved with the victim and that her silence was not only condoning a terrible crime but could also make her an accessory charged with obstruction of justice. Furthermore, he added, the victim was carrying an innocent life within her. Hearing the words innocent life, the wife suddenly burst into tears. She confessed that her husband had not been home that night. He had left the house shortly before 9 p.m. and only returned after midnight, looking frantic, his clothes in disarray. The wife's testimony was a fatal blow, completely shattering Richard's alibi. Richard Sterling was arrested shortly thereafter. In the interrogation room, despite having no way out, he remained stubbornly silent. But when Captain Thorne placed the 6-month ultrasound photo, found in Chloe's wallet, on the table, the cold-blooded man finally broke. He clutched his head, let out a primal scream, and confessed to the entirety of his horrific crime. His confession matched the evidence perfectly, from the argument and the strangulation to the barbaric act of disposing of the body. The death in the water tank case was solved. It stemmed from the selfishness, cowardice, and cruelty of a man who only wanted to satisfy his own desires without taking any responsibility. The victim, Chloe Davis, a devoted daughter pushed by circumstance, had stumbled down the wrong path and ultimately paid the price with her life, and the life of her unborn child. The death sentence handed down to Richard Sterling was a fitting punishment for his inhuman crime. But it could never alleviate the pain of the victim's family, nor could it erase the bitter lesson. Chloe's story is a sobering warning to other young women who dream of making a new life in the big city that traps are everywhere, and not all help is offered with kindness. It is also a damning indictment of the wealthy and powerful, those who believe they have the right to trample on the dignity and lives of others to protect their own fabricated existence. Los Angeles is glamorous, but it is also filled with tragedy. And somewhere, in its apartment complexes and small alleys, there are other Chloes, still struggling, hoping their dreams won't end in a cold water tank.